Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I am live on YouTube. And believe it or not, I've got my Rockfin page up. So for the first time, I'm going to be on Rockfin. We're going to talk about the moral dilemma, a little philosophical discussion here tonight. The moral dilemma of supporting empire. Let's talk. Well, hello there, friends and neighbors. Garland Nixon here, and I'm gonna have. Well, guess what? So for the first time, I got to put this in the chat. For the first time, I'm streaming live on YouTube. I'm streaming live on Twitter, and guess what else? I'm streaming live. Oh crap! That's the wrong. Look, I just put the wrong. I just put the wrong thing in. I'm going to now put in the URL. So anyone who wants to watch me on Rockfin, there you go. There's the Rockfin URL. I am live streaming on Rockfin. I'm going to do more and more stuff on Rockfin with the intention at some point. Well, I'll put it like this. I'm going to probably do both YouTube and Rockfin for a while. I want to eventually go to Rockfin, but I have a feeling at some point the government disinformation board is going to make sure that I'm only streaming on Rockfin. So go check out my Rockfin channel. There's the in the chat. I put the URL. I put the page number. You can click on that. Also on my Twitter now for my Twitter profile, you can see that. So I'd like everybody, please join my Rockfin channel so that if for some reason I find myself out of here, then you can follow me on Rockfin. Everybody follow me on Rockfin. All right, so let's talk. I got an interesting article. A guy who I think a lot of, his name is Ajamu Baraka. Ajamu ran as the Green Party vice president with Jill Stein in 2016. I've since met him and found out he's a brilliant guy, right? And he wrote this article that really made me think philosophically. First of all, Red Pill Scholar, let me thank you. Red Pill Scholar says, hello, Garland, your opinion. Second Great Depression in the cards will go away the way of the USSR. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Yeah, the Second Great Depression is in the cards. Yes. And the idiot technocrats that we have are assuring that. So yes, I would go with the yes on the Second Great Depression being in the cards. Thank you. They're Red Pill Scholar. All right. So this was interesting. And he brought about the question of living in an empire and supporting the horrible things that an empire does and existing within the political environment. So let's talk about it, the Poor People's Campaign. So one of the things that Ajamu gets into is what Reverend William Barber, and William Barber, this is a picture of him right here. He's a guy from North Carolina. I know some people that know him well. And he does this thing called the Poor People's Campaign. And what the Poor People's Campaign basically does is they go to the governor and the government and they seek redress for poor and working people, right? The working poor, the poor, right? And being a preacher, that's a very Martin Luther King-esque kind of thing to do. And what you do is you go to the government and you say, you've got to fund programs for, impoverished people. And that's a very preachery kind of thing to do, don't you think? That's what you would expect a preacher to do. Let's see what we got here. How and when does this war end? It's hard to believe U.S. will allow Russia to win. Okay, taking a peace, Ukraine nuclear war. I'm going to answer that towards the end. I'll answer all those super chats. So let's keep going. I certainly thank you that, Chris. I'm going to definitely answer that. So from what I've heard of him, he's a genuine person, and that's what he believes his life's calling is. Okay, so here's what happened. And even Ajamu says, Reverend William Barber, an indisputable champion of the poor and a consistent voice demanding an end to poverty, right? So he acknowledges who this guy is, but he says may have made a serious moral and ethical error that effectively placed him outside of the Kingian framework, right? The Martin Luther King that informed Dr. King's work, especially during the last year. Okay. So if you remember, one of the important things and one of the things that might have got him killed was Martin Luther King did all of the work for the poor and for, everybody being treated the same, racism, discrimination, and all that. But that last year, He came out against the Vietnam War, but not just against the Vietnam War. He came out as an anti-war guy. And if you listen to him, he come out as an anti-empire guy. And that's when they killed him, which you'll find that not shocking, right? And he was still into racial equality, but he was very much into economic. What about poor white and poor black people, right? What about the poor people, period? So he was doing a poor people's campaign thing, and it started getting more multiracial. And then he said, I'm opposed to war. And he started saying, then he started saying, we're dropping bombs over there and spending all this money on war when we should be doing that stuff here, right? So he was really starting to move in the direction of where I am, right? An anti-imperialist, anti-empire. Everybody in the world deserves an opportunity in their respective nations to develop their country however they deem fit. And we shouldn't be over there killing people and using the excuse that we're there to help them while we actually just steal their resources, because that's what empire is about. Okay. But what Barber goes on to say, and so he says, listen to this. This is what William Barber writes. Despite the political gridlock on Capitol Hill, Republicans, Democrats have acted swiftly to approve historic military aid to Ukraine. In the face of such a moral imperative, it was moral, right? It would be anathema for either party to ask, how are we going to pay for it? Okay, that's the bottom line. That's what he says. So here's a guy standing up for the poor, all of that kind of stuff. And then he says, now, this is a guy who's going to say he's going to challenge the money going to war and all that. But he starts off by saying, Republicans and Democrats have acted swiftly to approve historic military aid to Ukraine in the face of such a moral imperative, right? So now giving money to these Nazis is a moral imperative. It would be anathema for either party to ask, how are we going to pay for it? There's a huge problem there, but let's start with one. Anytime you support your government, the United States government of all governments, making war, you have to ask yourself, when was the last military action the United States was involved in that it acted for the good of the people in that country? Please? Was it Korea? Was it Philippines? Was it, whatever, on and on and on. Go in the last 20 years. Was it Libya? Was it Syria? Was it Iraq? Was it any of the bombings we do in Africa, AFRICOM? Was it Serbia? When was it? Was it Panama? When was the last time? None of them. All of them were morally indefensible. So now William Barber says we have, quote, it's a moral imperative so much to give money to Ukraine that it would be wrong for either party to say, how are we going to pay for it? So now what he says is the U.S. empire, it is morally correct for the United States to send money, weapons to Ukraine, $33 billion. Keep in mind something about this. So let me get rid of this and we'll go on to chat about the moral dilemma of supporting empire. Okay. Number one, William Barber to say it is a moral imperative to send money to give money to the people in you, $33 billion for starters. Of that $33 billion that Biden just asked for, let's not forget, last month, $13.6 billion went to, quote, Ukraine. This time, $30 billion for, quote, Ukraine. Of that $30 billion, $20 billion is going straight into the weapons industry. So it is to say, William Barber, a guy who I think the world of. I will get to why the moral dilemma and the moral question I would have for Dr. for Reverend Barber is a guy who I'm not going to say I have a bad word to say about him. But when you automatically say it is it is a moral imperative to give 20, but now remember 13.6 billion last month, now another 33 billion. And that's a moral imperative. Of that $20 billion, which is exactly what it would cost to end homelessness in America right now. $20 billion goes directly to Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon and the arms makers. 20 billion straight into the hands of the arms makers. That's a moral imperative. Secondly, it's going to go over there right into the hands of into the most corrupt country in the world right into the hands of a bunch of corrupt people. So the money, 20 billion of that 33 stays here, goes into the hands of the war profiteers. The rest of it goes over there. And if you read what that money spent for, it's providing health care, it's providing pensions and social security and food for the people of Ukraine. Two things. Number one, if you think in that corrupt country that any of that's going to go to the people of Ukraine, I got a bridge between Manhattan and Brooklyn to sell you. We'll start there. Secondly, if it were, would it be morally substantial support? Okay, could you morally support the argument that we should send that money to the people of Ukraine before we send it to the people of America? That's number two. But number three, and more importantly, in order for Reverend Barber to say that, for any preacher to say it's a moral imperative to send 33 billion, now upwards of almost 47 billion to Ukraine, that would mean, if for you to say it's a moral imperative, that means you have a very clear understanding of what's going on, of the dynamics around Ukraine, and that you have taken a position, a moral position on it. So that means either one of two things to me, because the moral position doesn't make much sense. The moral position on Ukraine is this: the United States overthrew the government of Ukraine. Exacted a coup in that country in 2014. How do we have a moral position to pump arms into a country on Russia's border? We overthrew the government, literally, of that country. We installed a pro-government, a pro-American, rapidly anti-Russian government on Russia's border, including and heavily influenced by admitted proud Nazis, not neo-Nazis, Nazis, people who gave their political and cultural heritage and lineage, traced it to a guy named Stepan Bandera, who was a Nazi supporter, who was a guy who was proud to be a fascist and a supporter of Nazis. And now you have people in this country, people at the highest levels of this country, who literally have Nazi tattoos, who are proud. In January, in the Rada, which is the parliament for the Ukraine, they passed bills, 10, or I believe it was 12 different names, including Stepan Bandera, were officially recognized by the governments as heroes of Ukraine. And all of these people were Nazi collaborators who literally participated in the extermination of Jews. That's the country that it's a moral imperative for this country, a country where the government made it illegal to speak Russian and would actually go around on the street. If somebody was heard speaking Russian, they'd be written a ticket and get a fine for speaking Russian there in areas that were completely Russian. A country that shut down the newspapers, shut down the radio stations, any of them that were Russian speaking or that opposed the far right-wing government, that made it illegal to be a member of the Communist Party. Illegal to be a member, unlike in the United States, where it's perfectly legal. We have a constitution. A country that was just plain fascist. And that even now, the United States is sending military arms to people who are admitted proud fascists. So we armed a country. We made it pro-fascist. Okay, let's not forget, these fascists and Nazis did not have power in the government. They had next to none. They had 2 or 3% of the vote. The United States overthrew the country and then installed a government which we then worked to ensure was infested with Nazis. The Azov battalion, C-14, IDAR, all of these Nazi fascist battalions, they were incorporated into the Ukrainian government, but only after the coup, only after the United States inserted a coup government, where they inserted and inculcated into the formal Ukraine government. So you've got a formal government that has proud Nazis, people who have swastikas painted on them, people who hold up swastika flags, goose stepping, Sieg Heil yelling Nazis. We're supporting them, and Reverend William Barber is saying we have a moral imperative to provide weapons. Let me add this: So the United States goes to the uh, a country on the border of Russia, overthrows the government, installs a rabidly anti-Russian government, pumps that country full of weapons, and so here's the issue: the United States is also doing that to Taiwan. I would ask Reverend William Barber, do you think that there is a moral imperative to do that also? That there are three great powers, that one of the powers, the United States, somehow has a moral imperative to go to the border of the other two powers and to pump those two countries on their border full of weapons. That, my friend, is a recipe for disaster, for war, for potential nuclear war, for potential World War III. All of the most horrible things that humankind could ever imagine could be created by those. And Reverend William Barber says we have a moral imperative to do that. And here's the next question. It begs the obvious question. If you argue, and I'm going to continue going somewhere else with this, if you argue that, my question would have to be to Reverend Barber, as a kind of soul as he is, as much as I think about him, there's only two options here. If you are arguing that we have a moral imperative to arm the Nazis in Ukraine, are you ignorant of the dynamics wherein we're literally arming white supremacist Nazis, people who are avowed white supremacists, a country where white supremacists and Nazis from all over the world travel to Ukraine, where the guy in Christchurch, New Zealand, who shot and killed, went to two different mosques, and I think he killed 40 or 41 people and injured 30 others, had come from Ukraine, where he trained with the Azov battalion, and when he committed that mass murder, he had an Azov battalion patch on his bulletproof vest. That's who we are. Reverend Barber says we have a moral imperative to support. So the question of Reverend Barber is obvious. Do you not know this stuff? Are you ignorant of these things? Or, and that's going to take me into the next area, are you aware of that reality? And once again, I'm going to put the rock fan, Command V, and let me put that in. So I hope somebody will click on that and go over and watch me on Rockfin. I hope everybody here, I'm going to ask you to please join my Rockfin channel. I really appreciate that. Go click on the Rockfin channel, become a member over there. I appreciate it. I'm going to do a lot of things. So that takes me to the second part of it, right? So we start off with a specific instance of Reverend William Barber saying it's a moral imperative that we arm the Nazis, spend $33 billion, take the money that could be used to end homelessness in America and send it to friggin' Nazis on Russia's border, because how could that possibly go wrong? Or do you know it, and are you turning your back on that? So that's the second part it takes me to, of where I am. If you're a single person and you go out and you meet some person you're interested in, right? You're a young guy, you go to a singles bar and you meet this pretty girl, and oh man, she's everything you could have ever imagined, right? And here's the question: what are the deal killers? I'm a real believer in the term deal killers, right? And it's like, well, she's really nice and we get along real well, and I think she looks great, and she likes me, and she thinks I look great. What a great relationship. Oh, wait a minute, I found out she's a hatchet murderer. That may be a deal killer. Now, when I was young, as crazy and full of hormones as I was, probably wouldn't have killed the deal. Under the circumstances, there's a lot of deals. Hatchet murder, I'd have probably tried to look over that in some instances. That's how stupid I was. But anyway, my point being, in fact, I probably dated some girls that were real close to being hatchet murderers. But at any rate, my point being, that's not important now. My point being, I'm getting at the deal killer issue, right? That's important because to me, when you talk about arming Nazis, when you talk about supporting Nazis, right? That's like 10 times, that's like a deal killer on steroids. Okay. That's a deal killer on steroids for me. So when I look at it and I say, like right now, people are out like, oh, the whole abortion issue and oh, the abortion rights and all of that, right? And I look at the Democratic Party, and when you have sunken to the point where you have a disinformation board, and you have to have I don't fault the Democratic Party for having a disinformation board. I don't, strategically speaking, I don't see how they get away without having one. I mean, when you're literally sending arms to a bunch of goose-stepping, Sieg-Heiling, Hitler-loving Nazis, you better manage the narrative because that could go bad for you. I mean, I'm just honestly speaking. So I ain't hating on the Democrats. In fact, I would argue, since they're Nazi supporters, look, you support Nazis in a way. If you think about it, a disinformation governance board kind of comes along with the turf. You know what I mean? It's like if you're a hatchet murderer, you got to have a hatchet. And you've got to have like body bags and duct tape because after you chop the person up with a hatchet, you got to clean up the mess. You got to have bleach and water so you can clean everything up, right? So after you've killed the poor victim, you got to clean up the mess so that hopefully, ideally, you won't get caught and you won't end up in the hoosegow, right? Same principle. You're the Democratic Party now, and you're Joe Biden, and you're the guy who was like, yes, Charlottesville. Why, that's the reason. I was inspired by Charlottesville. When I saw those guys walking around with their tiki torches saying, Jews will not replace me, I said, that's the deal killer for me. I got to go in and fix that. So you're Joe Biden. That's what you ran on. We got to stop these Nazis. Now, here we are 14 months later, and you're like, hey, my friend over here, well, okay, he's a member of the Azov Battalion. You might not want to look at that weird patch he's wearing, and please don't ask him to pull up his shirt because you really don't want to see those tattoos. And yeah, he's goose steps every now and then. I mean, I'm not saying he goose steps all the time. Perhaps every now and then he's goose stepping, right? That's your boy there, and you're arming him. And if you're Joe Biden and you have sunk to the level that you are arming goose stepping Nazis, you're a fool if you don't have a government disinformation board because you got to the government has to spit out a whole hell of a lot of disinformation to maintain the facade at that point that you are a legitimate political party, to maintain the facade that you are in favor of the illusion that you're in favor of democracy. Trust me, if you're supporting Nazis, you do not like democracy. You're not interested in democracy. And as we used to say, I was in law enforcement, and there's a lot of jokes. They're hard, it's hard, but it's fair, right? There was hard jokes. And I was a major. And one of the things I used to always say, and people say, oh, but Major Nixon, why do I have to do this or that? I say, hey, we're here to protect democracy, not practice it, right? And I was a big jokester. So I would say silly stuff like that. But as much of a joke as that seems, if you think about what you're defining as democracy, it could be very, very accurate. So the Biden team now are saying we're here to protect democracy, not practice it. What they mean is they're not here to protect democracy in the way that you would understand that term to mean. They're here to protect the symbol of democracy. They're here to protect the illusion of democracy, not practice actual democracy. So in the same way that they say Ukraine was a democratic country, but we know that it outlawed the language of Russian when like 30% of the country speak Russian, or 30 or 40% of the country speaks Russian. They outlawed the language. When we know that they closed down radio stations that were Russian speaking, some of the most popular radio stations, they closed down newspapers for the Russian speakers and any newspaper or media outlet that opposed the government. When we know that there was a guy named Medvedev or Medvedchuk or something like that. He was the top opposition party candidate opposing Zelensky. And at the time that they charged him with treason and locked him and arrested him, you see what I'm saying? Charged him with treason and arrested him. He was polling higher than Zelensky. So imagine if just whoever, Trump, Joe Biden, whoever, they're running against something and that person starts polling higher than them and they just lock them up and charge them with treason. That's basically what happened in Ukraine. So when the United States says we're protecting democracy in Ukraine, they don't practice democracy in Ukraine. But what is the U.S. doing? It has to tell you, the empire has to tell you it's democracy. So we are protecting something, an illusion, a symbol, something that looks like democracy, that seems like democracy, that they can, something that they can put forth as democracy. But a very simple view of Ukraine and you will realize they didn't anything any close to a democracy. Then they say it's an independent country. The United States literally overthrew the government and installed a puppet government. Zelensky, I don't know if you've been paying attention. Does anybody truly believe that guy's in charge of the country? So they say it's an independent country. That's a lie. They say that it is it's a democracy. Nowhere near it. So what the United States is doing is it has to convince its people of a double lie. That they are standing up for an independent country and democracy, neither of which is of Ukraine. And they have to convince their people that they're standing up for the country and the people of Ukraine, rather than simply using the country and the people's lives as a battering ram, as a proxy to try to take down one of the other two of the other three superpowers. They want to take down the other superpower so they can remain the sole superpower, the unipolar. It is really a cynical, sinister, and devious thing that the United States is doing. Evil on it. First of all, it makes sense. It really makes sense that the US would be supporting Nazis, because what we're doing is evil on a Nazi level scale. Okay, so the moral dilemma becomes people who live here. Now, what do? Do you pick the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? The Republican Party is just as bad. Only they're down with this, but the Republican Party is looking at China. So the cult, the blue cult, and the Democrats, they want to instigate a war with Russia, and they're risking our lives for nuclear catastrophe. The idiot Republicans are pretending like they're the saviors, and they want to do the same thing with China. So I say, you're living in this country. If you call yourself patriotic or not, let's say you call yourself patriotic. If you call yourself patriotic, what is your position? Is it patriotic to say my government has taken a position that another country is adversarial, and a patriot will go along with the government once? Is it patriotic to say, this is what Garland says, it's patriotic to say that I want what's best interest of the United States of America right now, right? But I don't define the United States of America as these psychotic sociopath neocons who are running it. I don't define the United States as the corporations that want to go around the world and run the rest of the world so they can very easily get their hands on cheap resources from people in what are developing nations and rob them blind and kill them and overthrow their governments. I'm opposed to that. When I say I want what's in the best interest of the people of the United States, that's peace and prosperity worldwide. How can we achieve peace and prosperity for the people? Not the government going around here looking out for the corporations and looking out for their greed and their psychopathic urges to want to run the country. So I can say I'm a patriotic dissenter. There's a picture that I'll never forget. Some of the people, you may have seen it. And in that picture, it's from Nazi Germany. And there's all of these people. The whole crowd has that handout, the Nazi salute, right? Actually, it's like, what is it? Heart to the sun, where they go like this. They put their hand, their fist, it goes over their heart. And then they go out to the sun, right? Out like that, right? So the whole crowd, everybody, you can see all the Nazis are all standing up, and everybody in the crowd's got their hand out with the Nazi thing. And there's one guy sitting there, and he's got his arms crossed. And it's obvious that guy's saying, this is some bullshit here, man. You sons of bitches are lost your mind. And this is in Nazi Germany. There was the one guy with his arms crossed saying, I ain't down. I'm not down with this whole Nazi Germany kind of stuff, right? I think that's important, because I think it's important. What's important to me is to be that guy. And not to be that guy because I want to do something personal, not to be that guy because I want to make a point that I'm different from everybody, but to be that guy because that guy's standing on principle. That guy's saying, I'm not down with this Nazi stuff. And so to me, to be patriotic as an individual, as a person, also requires having some level of moral standards that you believe in and that you think is in the best interest of your nation. And when you see your nation turning in a way that's fascistic, when you see your nation now that has governance boards for what you can speak and what you can't say, what you can read, what you can't read, there are some countries in the West now where if you were to forward something from RT or Sputnik or a prohibited website to somebody else, you could be charged like a $50,000 fine. If you were to go to RT or Sputnik and print out an article and go give that to somebody, you could be fined $50,000 just for handing somebody an article. What kind of thing? I think UK, what kind of thing is that for going on RT and Sputnik in some countries? If you were to go on RT and Sputnik and say something and it was 100% true, completely easily substantiated, right? You could be charged just for going on there. But that's fascism to me. Think about this. To tell me, for the government to tell me I can't read RT or Sputnik or Press TV or CGTN or whatever I wanted to read, Venezuela, whatever, Telesur, for to tell me I can't read. If North Korea has a news or website, if I want to go on there, I should be able to do that. And here's my argument. I think that think about a jury, 12 people. So there's a case, right? And here's the case, whatever it is. Garland's accused with mopery on the high seas, right? Okay, you separate this jury into three groups of four. The first group hears the prosecution and only the prosecution's case. The second four people hear the defense and only the defense's case. And the third four people hear both the defense and the prosecution. Who's going to be the best informed? Would it be the people that only heard the prosecution? Would it be the people that only heard the defense? Or would it be people that heard the prosecution and the defense? The answer to that question screams out. The best people that are informed are the people that heard both sides of the issue. A man who only hears one side who only knows one side of an issue knows little of that. There's an old adage. Right. So what our government is saying is, what if they say, well, we don't, nothing that you say in Sputnik or RT it's all propaganda. Well, I know already that a lot of the stuff that I read in the Washington Post and the New York Times or wherever I know, turn on MSNBC and CNN, that's propaganda. It's lies and propaganda. And a lot of it, most of it's lies and propaganda. And I can substantiate and prove that. 4 years of how about we go back to weapons of mass destruction? How about we go back to the first Gulf War, the lies about the babies being thrown out of incubators? All lies. How about we go to Trumpity Trump and Russiagate for 4 years? All lies. So what about we go to Hunter Biden's laptop? They lied about it intentionally. So we know our government lies. But if I say, look, I'm going to read the Wall Street Post, the Washington Post, whatever, whoever, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all that, knowing that I'm getting a lot of lies and propaganda. I'm going to read Sputnik and RT and say, well, they're going to give me their stuff. I know I'm going to get the side of the elite ruling class and the neocon warmongers and the intelligence community in the Washington Post and the New York Times, CNN, Fox, etc. I know that if I see Sputnik and TASS and RT, I'm going to get things through the lens of how the Russians see things, right? But I want both because that's what will make me best informed. And now the U.S. government is saying, no, you can't have both. We feel that you will be best informed. Think about this, the logic in this. We feel that you will be best informed if you only hear the prosecution's case, and we are the prosecution. And you say, well, can I hear a few witnesses from the defense? No, they're a bunch of liars, frauds, and cheats. You don't want to hear anything from the defense, only the prosecution. So my point being, when you get caught up there, you're being had, you're being lied to. To me, I could not take a position if I hadn't heard both sides. So I see Reverend William Barber saying it's a moral imperative to send $33 billion to Ukraine. And I would ask Reverend William Barber a lot of questions. They would have to be with two things. Are you aware of all of the dynamics that have created this military crisis in Ukraine? And if you are, I have some questions to ask you about them, since you think it's a moral imperative. If you're not fully aware of everything, then you're making an error. And the next question is, why aren't you putting or pushing for the kind of openness, for the kind of transparency that we need so that we can examine anything we want for ourselves? You see, the elite ruling class wants to keep us ignorant and stupid. So we'll say stuff like that. So we'll say things like, when they say we want to give $33 billion to country X, when it ain't going to country X, it's going straight to Lockheed Martin. But when they say that, we'll say it's a moral imperative to do it. And then when Reverend Barber says, look, We need money for the poor people. They're going to say, who's going to pay for it? We don't have it. We already know the game. So you've already ceded that ground to them, saying, well, when they got to give money to Nazis in Ukraine, we shouldn't say who's going to pay for it. They're going to go, you're right about that. Here's the problem. We got an $814 billion coming up next, at $814 billion Pentagon budget. And they've already said, Congress has already said, excuse me, they're going to increase that. That ain't enough. 814 billion don't get it done, right? Okay, so we're there. In arguing that it was a moral imperative when they used the Ukraine crisis, you've already argued that it's a moral imperative. You're already halfway to that 814 billion. And when you're already there, and when they say we got to have more, what are you going to do? Say it's not a moral imperative? So the problem is when you support immoral acts, when you cleanse and launder immoral empire and imperialist acts. Okay, if it's okay to do that in Ukraine, is it okay to overthrow the government of Iraq? Was that all right to attempt to overthrow the government of Syria, to overthrow the government of Libya? Was that okay? The U.S. is trying to overthrow the governments of dozens of countries right now. Ethiopia, Sudan, country after country, we're trying to overthrow the government. We were part of overthrowing the government of Burkina Faso all over Africa. United States would like to overthrow the governments of Russia and China and Iran. We're trying to overthrow the governments of Nicaragua, of Cuba, on and on and on. So which one of those is not a moral imperative? You see, at some point, to me, here's where I've arrived. I couldn't support either one of these parties because they're wrong. They're immoral. What they're doing is wrong. And so to me, once again, in the chat, I put in the link to Rockfin. I'm going to ask everybody here to click on that link today. I'm going to ask everybody here to go to Rockfin and join my Rockfin channel so you can watch it there. And I would prefer you watch it there over here. I want to get everybody moved to Rockfin, including me, because guess what? You see the direction this thing is going. You're not going to be able to watch me here. You are going to be able to watch me on Rockfin. They've got an app. And you know what I like about the Rockfin app? Unlike YouTube, you can, on your phone, if you're playing the Rockfin app and you minimize it and it goes down, you're not seeing it, you can still listen. Like my YouTube, on YouTube, if I'm listening to a video on my phone and I minimize and the video disappears, the sound disappears. That isn't so with Rockfin. You can minimize that and let the sound still play in the background. So Rockfin is great. If you don't have Rockfin on your channel, I don't know about an app for TV, but you know what? If you've got a regular old TV, smart TV, then you can just mirror your phone to the TV. There's a number of ways to do it, but please, ROKFIN, everybody go there, join, and be a part of that, be a member of that community. I'm going to be doing a lot of things on there. I'm YouTube. Not only that, I mean, there's lots of things I wanted to discuss about COVID, things about like that I really couldn't do here. So let's, see what we can do. At any rate, Rockfin, Garland Nixon. All right. So then it comes back to, let me continue. And then I get back to the issue of the abortion, regardless of how I feel about it. The bottom line is this: I have no confidence that the Democratic Party is going to take a moral position. I mean, to me, once you're supporting Nazis, I don't know where you go from there. There's times when somebody does something. It's like I said, you're a young guy, you go out of a bar, you meet the young girl, and oh man, she's great, and everything's going great. And you think, man, she's gorgeous. I'm crazy about her, and she's the happiest, funniest person I ever met, and oh, all is well. And then you find out she's a hatchet murderer. How do you come back from that? How do you hatchet murderer? Okay, yeah, that's that may not be cool, but I can keep going. There's some things that just put up a red flag that you can't drive by. Start out a red flag, it's a stop sign. And when you're supporting Nazis, to me, what happens is this whole thing makes you understand what the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, these two brainwashed cults, it starts making you understand what they're capable of. And when you see the media, things like this morning, there's this article in the New York Times, the United States helped the Ukrainians kill 12 Russian generals. And I'm thinking, that sounds like bullshit. I mean, it's in the New York Times. And then this afternoon, I read the Pentagon says they have not done anything like that. And they know it. You know what I mean? So what you're going to get is one propaganda after another. Now the last thing I got, U.S. intelligence says that they helped the Ukrainians sink a Russian destroyer or something, right? And do I know that what did the U.S. intelligence? I don't know any. No, if they did, it would be really stupid. And you're looking at probably starting World War III. The Russians may say, "Okay, if you're killing our people at war, then I'm going to hit the Pentagon with a hypersonic missile and flatten it." And would they? Could you say that we killed some of theirs? They killed some of ours, and they've got like submarines offshore. Those things got those hypersonic missiles have like a 1,900-kilometer range. Trust me, they could strike us from the subs in the Atlantic. So, do we want to put ourselves in that position? That's how stupid and idiotic that the New York Times are, and I don't even believe it anyway. I watched it this morning, and I mean, I'm watching TV, and they're saying there's heavy fighting in Mariupol. Mariupol, that's it, and that brave fighters are holding out in the Azovstal steelworks. They're Nazis. They're literal self-admitted Nazis in there. They put out a video where they're singing a song to Stepan Bandera, a Nazi. They're Nazi inspiration. So I got to turn on the news in the United States of America today and watch the news sing praise to the brave and proud literal Nazis, and lie and tell me there's still fighting going on in Mariupol. And I'm like, well, let me look and see what's going on. I didn't think there was fighting. They're preparing for a parade. The Russians have taken the city completely, cleared it out of the Nazis, who are the last of them are held up in this Mariupol steelworks plant underground, this big bunker that was built during the Cold War to withstand nuclear whatever Holocaust. And so they're all underground in this bunker, maybe 1,000 or 2 of them, trying to get work a plan to get their way out. It's surrounded, so that thing's over. It's like a tomb. They've driven themselves into this big tomb. Basically, I would suspect that the Russians will just say, "We're just going to put up a sign that says prison and surround this thing with barbed wire and leave you here indefinitely. You've chosen your own prison. That's yours. It's your tomb." But that being said, they're planning for it. There's heavy fighting. They're setting up for a parade on Victory Day which is the 9th of May or something, which is the day that Russia commemorates the victory in World War II, where they lost 30 million people. So imagine they ain't happy about these goose-stepping Nazis frigging around on their border. So the bottom line is, no, I cannot align myself with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party either, but I can't align myself with them for anything and believe that they're acting on the best behalf of their people. They're sending on their people. The people of this country are struggling. They can't pay their bills. Things are getting high and getting higher. Things are bad. Things are not good. And we're about to go into a recession, and they're taking actions that are going to make it worse. And I'm supposed to believe that they're looking out for us? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think I believe it. So the idea that in any circumstance that one of these parties is looking for us is preposterous. And the other thing is this, that William Barber, God bless him, he's doing the fine work, but now he's gone over to the dark side. And what I mean is, because he's putting a moral tag on a dangerous, sinister, cynical, and immoral action of starting a fire on the door of a nuclear power, intentionally doing that, and of cynically and immorally grinding away the lives of tens and hundreds of thousands of, at minimum, scores of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, just to satiate the appetite of the U.S. empire, hopefully to hurt Russia. And it's not even doing that. And it's hurting Europe. And meanwhile, there was a big recently, I think it was Rand put out a big study, and what they said was the U.S. is working to try to find countries to put offensive missiles in. They want to aim all these missiles at China to attack China with offensive, not defensive. Offensive missiles, and they're having trouble finding countries that'll host them because those countries don't want to get turned into Ukraine. Okay, so you've got the United States that's saying we're having trouble. We want to ring China with missiles pointing at missiles. We're going to call China aggressive, but we're going to point missiles at them, and we're going to put tens of billions of dollars putting missiles ringed all around China, heading towards China, while the people of America can't afford gas, while we don't have a frickin' in America, people don't have a roof, barely a roof over their head. 650,000 to 1 million people homeless, homeless children, homeless families, homeless people everywhere, homeless veterans suffering everywhere, and they're spending scores of billions of dollars to threaten China. And then someone who has stood up for the poor suddenly puts a moral stamp on this thing and says we shouldn't even ask how you're going to pay for it. It's a bad state of affairs for that. It's a sorry state of affairs. And I'm not here to down William Barber. I'm going to hope and pray that Reverend Barber just doesn't know, that he just doesn't understand that the United States is wrong. The United States is filling a country on the border of Russia, that the U.S. overthrew the government, and they're pumping this country full of weapons that aren't going to do any good, by the way, and that are lying to Americans, saying that the Ukrainians are winning the war when they're getting grinded into a pulp. Russia is using, I've heard 25 to anywhere from 10 to 30% of its military power. People don't understand. You're talking about a superpower. You're talking about Bambi versus Godzilla. It is 100%, it is 1,000,000% a propaganda to argue that Ukraine has any chance of winning this war. Any chance, no chance, never had a chance. We always knew how, and they're getting really the hell knocked out of them. Russia owns the skies. How are they doing anything? They're getting crushed with missiles. They're getting blown to smithereens. The best thing that they could do would be to come to a diplomatic end, to sit down with Russia. And now the puppets who work for the United States are saying we'll never come to a diplomatic end with Russia, which means Russia's just going to continue, and they're just going to keep taking more and more Ukraine until they've taken all that they want. They don't give a crap. They understand that Ukraine, the Russians say it, they understand that Ukraine has no agency, that they're just puppets for the United States, and Washington, D.C. is what makes the decisions. And they're like, so we're going to use our military might, and we're going to kick your asses right out of here. That's what they're in the process of doing, and they ain't going to stop until it's done, and they ain't going to give up, and they're not going to give in, and that's never going to happen. They see this as an existential threat. And that's what they are, as does China. China views this the exact same way. China knows that the United States is trying to destabilize Russia so they can get to China. So in reality, the United States is not just at war with Russia. The United States is at war with Russia and China. So as we do this, and as at the same time, we're trying to encircle China with missiles and all kinds of things. The United States, there are 3 world powers, and one of them, which is the United States, is literally employing aggressive war tactics, economic war tactics, kinetic war tactics against the other 2. And Reverend Barber would say there's some kind of a moral imperative here. Men, I would just say this: you must not understand what's going on here. I will give you that benefit of the doubt and say you just don't understand it. And now that's the question we have to ask ourselves. How far do we go? When the United States says, yay, we're going to do this or that to Russia, and we're going to destroy the economy of Europe, which they're doing. We're going to destroy the economy of the United States, which sure as hell is what they're doing. Do we back that and call ourselves patriotic? And then when it's on to China, the next thing, do we say the conservatives, are they just as stupid as are they just as brainwashed cult as the Democrats? And they say, oh, it's the Chinese Communist Party. Let's go there too. Because if you think the Russian sanctions are hurting, you ain't seen nothing. China's our #1 trading partner. We have this major deficit. If the United States were to piss China off and to go against China in the same way, what would our shelves look like? There'd be nothing on them. What would happen to your car when it breaks down? You wouldn't be able to get parts for it. You wouldn't be able to get parts because a lot of the stuff is Chinese. Our industries would shut down. A lot of the things that we use every day, all that comes from China. So if these idiots were to get their wish and engage militarily or even in the same kind of economic war that we've instituted against Russia, that Russia seems to be winning, I might add, an economic war of attrition, it would be economic suicide. Not to mention, again, these are 2 nuclear superpowers. How stupid are we? So I say that the philosophical answer to me, to all of this, is we must oppose the United States empire. That we must understand that the United States empire is not acting on the best interest, for the best interest of the United States people. Because if it was, it wouldn't need a disinformation board. It would say transparency is the best policy. It would say sunshine is the best disinfectant. Therefore, I want everybody to read anything you can, learn everything you can, and come back to us with all the questions you have, and we'll answer them honestly. That's what the United States government would say if it was actually in our best interest, but it's not, so it won't. It's not, so it won't. So to me, our responsibility is to ask them questions, or those questions ourselves. Our responsibility is to research those things ourselves, to find our own answers. And when we come up with our own answers, and to me, when you understand what an empire is and that this country is not acting on behalf of its people, then the only answer becomes, how do we work towards making that change? Do we keep voting for the same old hapless, brainless, warmongering schmucks? I don't think that's the answer. Do you vote for somebody who's a third party, an independent or something? Well, if you're going to vote, I think that's where you have to go. Do you go to the streets with signs? Yes. Do you stop going along with this crap? Do you go online? Do you make videos? Do you do tweets? Do you do whatever you can to say to your fellow Americans, you're being had, you're being took, lied to, hoodwinked, been bamboozled, misled and led astray? I think you do all of those. So let me see. I got a couple of super chats, and it is my responsibility to find them. And they were here we go. So let's start here. Christian, how and when does this war end? It's hard to believe USA will allow Russia to win and take any piece of Ukraine nuclear war. So let's talk about this, Chris. This war wins when Russia decides that it's done. That's when this war ends. At this point, on Russia's border, Russia has escalatory military dominance. Russia will dominate this war, and Russia will surely win this war because its military is far too powerful on its own border. Now, if the United States or NATO says we're going to intervene, I doubt that very seriously. Why is it? Because they can't win. If you talk to the people who know best, they say NATO's a paper tiger. It does not have the military to stand up against the Russian military on the Russian border. It'll be shredded and torn to pieces quickly. Keep in mind, Russia's using what, 20? It's somewhere between 15 and 30% of its military might against that. So that means the other 70% sitting back there saying, don't screw with us. They're barely using their Air Force at all. Their Air Force is sitting there, barely using that. So they could unleash holy hell on the United States. And the United States has mostly light armored stuff. They just sent another Stryker tactical group of 1,000 soldiers. The U.S. said, yes, we're sending a Stryker group to Poland. Do you know what Strykers are? They're APCs, armored personnel carriers. They're small armored vehicles. How are they going to work against tanks? How are they going to work against, you know what I mean? They're not heavy armor. They're not going to go up against the first tank guard of the Russians and survive long. And recently, there was a UK general. I'll see if I can find it. Find that story real quick. UK general. Here we go. Let's look at this article right here. Let me take it over. We're going to take a peek at this article. I'm going a little longer than I thought, but I think it's important because I want to make this point. Okay, let's look at this and let's get rid of Chris in. Independent. This is the Independent. NATO isn't ready for war with Russia, warns UK general. Now, when you go down here and you start looking at it, I'll try later, and you go down here. He went on, my overall concern in answering that question in that main reason, because it's like the second, whatever would be, if whatever happens in Ukraine causes President Putin to escalate it for his own purposes into other parts of NATO, that's a very much easier question. We'll be dealing with a breach of Article 5. My overall concern in answering that question is that the main reason we're keen to avoid a war between Russia and NATO is that NATO isn't ready, and we should be ashamed of that. He goes on to say, Tobias Elwood, chair of the Defense Committee, asked the General whether Britain had the necessary defense system to protect itself in the event of Russian attack. General Behrens replied, we absolutely do not. He also said, I don't think many people in the UK have given any thought to the consequences of Russian cruise missiles arriving in London. They exist, and we simply don't have the means to deal with them in anything above tiny numbers, right? Now, listen to this. This is what Scott Ritter says. And people are like, oh, don't watch this other stuff. Scott Ritter says this with unabashed. He said, if NATO was to go up against Russia on Russia's border, and within a couple of weeks, they'd have 2 or 3 weeks, they would be comprehensively defeated. This is a general who is talking to the UK Defense Committee, their Parliament's Defense Committee. What does he say? And if Britain was required to defend another NATO country from Russia, the example was given Estonia. Its forces would be destroyed in about a week by Russia's Air Force, he said. A week. So you ask me, so he goes out and they talk about what they need to do. And he says, we don't want to fight those dudes because we're going to get our butts kicked. Oh, really? Well, what if we had to go against those evil Ruskies? How long could we stand up? And he's like, they'd wipe us out in a week. Our forces would be destroyed. What that means is they would be annihilated. They would cease to exist in a week. So when you ask this question, Chris, how and when does the war end? When Russia is ready for it to end. It's hard to believe the USA will allow Russia to win and take any piece of Ukraine, which means the US has no way of stopping Russia. No way of stopping Russia. No military means. Now, do they want to use nukes? So what are they going to do? Stick a gun in their mouths? Okay, Russia, either you do that or we'll all kill ourselves. Over Ukraine, I don't think, first of all, the United States ain't giving no lives up over you. You think they give a shit about Ukraine? You ain't been paying attention. They symbolically, they don't want Russia to win. But if you understand how these technocrats work, chicken hawks like Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan, these people are scared to die. They're scared to die. And they know that if they get in a nuclear missile, they're all going to die, that they're going to get afraid. And they are chicken and they are scared. They want to put soldiers in harm's way, but they're not putting their little skinny pink behinds in harm's way. So no, I don't think they're going to do anything nuclear because they're scared to die. They're chickens. I don't want to die. I'm not afraid to die, but I'm not in any rush. Yeah, I'm not a religious man, but my mother used to have an old saying, one of these days, the Lord's going to call me home, but I ain't homesick. That's the way I feel. I mean, I'm not a religious guy, but you get the point. I'm in no rush. Let's see what else. Red Pill Scholar says, your opinion, Second Great Depression in the cards. Will America go the way of the USSR? Yeah, America's screwed, blued, and tattooed. Are you kidding me? These idiots. See, let me say something. Everybody thinks they're an economist, but I talk to economists. And let me tell you something. Once again, everybody, don't forget, I'm going to put the Rockfin link in the chat. Everybody, please click on that. Please go to Rockfin. Please, everybody, there's 131 people. I need 131 new members. I expect 131 new members. Smash the like button here, but I expect 131 new members at least tonight. Thousands of new members. Garland Nixon, my Rockfin channel. You can go to my Twitter feed, and at my profile right at the top is my Rockfin link. So everybody who's watching this wherever, do that. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so they're scared, and I don't see that happening. And here's the way these people work, though. They're all about the narrative. So now, as poor Ukrainian soldiers get pulverized by the Russians, they're surrounded, they're dropped, there's just flak, there's bombs dropping all around them, they're getting trashed, wiped out, and destroyed. The US is like, okay, no problem there, screw them. How do we spin this? That's all they care about. That's it. How do they spin it? So what's going to happen? The Russians are going to take whatever they want in Ukraine, do whatever they want in Ukraine, and the US is going to say, well, they lost. And they wanted to take all of Ukraine, but they only went up to the Dnieper River or something. I expect the Russians to take Kharkiv. I expect them to take Odessa. I expect a land bridge all the way to Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula. I expect that's going to happen. And there's nobody that's going to stop them from doing it. It's not going to happen. Their military is too powerful. They could always add more if they want to. They're barely using their Air Force. And they are doing something that I think also scares the bejesus out of NATO. And that is, NATO is very much afraid to get into a land war. You know, the Western countries know that they can't have body bags coming home, that they can't have losses. The Russians are slow to go to war, but when they go to war, they understand they're going to take. Now the U.S. is like running the numbers up. Yes, the Ukrainians lost 4 people, and the Russians lost 38,000. One Russian guy with nothing but a Rambo knife in his mouth took out an entire column, a brigade, a division of Russians armor. So we get BS all the time. In reality, the way I see it, my research tells me exactly what you would expect to happen on the Russian border: a superpower against a non-superpower, that the poor Ukrainians are getting surrounded and mangled. And every now and then they'll get a tactical victory, or they'll get a surprise attack or something like that, and they'll take out some Russians or some Russian tanks or whatever. But overall, they are getting destroyed and wiped out, and there's not going to be anything left. And the U.S. people are going to wake up one day and they're going to say, how the Russians win? Because we were told there was no other way the Russians are going to win. Boris Johnson goes over and talks to Boris. Oops, sorry about that. Boris Johnson goes over to talk to the Ukrainians and tells them this is a fight between good and evil. How stupid is that? Is that George Bush-esque? So let me guess. In this fight between good and evil, the Nazis are on the good side. How's that work? Yeah, well, this is between good and evil, and the Nazis are on the good side. I got problems with that. At any rate, thank you very much. Go to Rockfin, and you can just type in my name, Garland Nixon. I'm there now. Join, become a member of my channel, all that kind of stuff. I think there's a way to join also and be a $9.99 paying member for premium content, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to, but that would be nice to, help me. I got my website up and help me getting things going. Yeah, go to garlandnixon.com. Or garlandnixonshow.com. That's up. I don't have anything there yet, but just to see that where my website is. So thank you very much. Yeah, T. Terry says the same thing. Yeah, they're going to take it. Here's the thing about it. Here's what William Martin says. Odessa would be a bad fight. The Russians don't want to destroy that city. You're right. They don't want to destroy the city. It means a lot to them historically. I do think this. I think what they're probably planning on doing is knocking the hell out of the Ukrainian army, is destroying the main army in the Donbass and other places, so that by the time they get to Odessa, there won't be much left to fight. Basically the Ukrainian army they'll have collapsed when most of the army has just been mangled from one end of the country to the other. There's no reinforcements coming. There's no ammunition coming. There's no extra food coming. There's nothing. And you're really military for your country has been comprehensively defeated. What are you, the last pocket of holdouts at that point? And I think that's what they're going to do with Odessa. That's going to be one of the last places they'll get to, and they're just going to say, dude, this is over. Is there really any point in doing that? Whether it'll work or not, I don't know, but I think that's going to be the plan. At any rate, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate all my friends on Rockfin watching. I'm looking over there. Wow, 23 people watching on Rockfin. How cool is that? Awesome. And I see the Borg says expect more false flags. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, wow. Oh, look at that. A whole bunch. Chicken Patty, everybody. Thank you, Chicken Patty. I knew. Let me tell you something. Chicken Patty and I are close. I knew that if there was one person on Rockfin and there was one person following me over there, that it would be Chicken Patty. So thank you very much, Chicken Patty. And I'm sure everyone else will follow you over. I certainly appreciate it. Rockfin, we look, they're going to cut my ass off at some point. All of us are out of history. So let's get moving over there. And not only that, I can talk about stuff over there. I'm going to do some videos over there where I give my thoughts on COVID, right? I'm going to definitely do that. I can't really do that on there. I mean, and I'm not some person who says nobody should ever take the vaccine. I do believe that people should have the opportunity to take it if they choose. And I do believe that people should have the information they need so they make an informed decision. That's what I believe. But at any rate, I'm going to have, wow, I have super chats at Rockfin too. Really? You can do super chats at Rockfin? Holy crap. I'm excited. I'm just learning, but wow, I'm excited. Oh, that's right. I see it. Tips. And Chuck Simon says, hey, Garland, glad to see you on Rockfin. Sad to hear about Reverend Barber. We're speaking nonsense. Wow. Skeptical Jerk is here. Slow News Day, my main man. I got to talk to him because I need to try to get Slow News Day, my man. Can you do 2:30 tomorrow? I need to interview you at 2:30 to 3 p.m. So you need to get back to me and let me know whether or not you can do that, my main man, Steve. Wow, I get tips and everything. I worry when Russia wins that U.S. and NATO won't accept it, and then what? World War III. Terrell says. Yeah, the problem is, and I keep going back to this. NATO doesn't have the military might to confront Russia, and they know it. And they know it. So that could help us out. And the more this drags on, the more we'll see that. The more we'll see that the economic destruction in Europe is going to start taking the attention of the European leaders, and they'll have to deal with that, and it's not going to be pretty. And I'm going to tell you, the Ukrainian refugee situation is not going to be pretty. So they got their hands full in Europe. We shall see what we shall see. The longer, what's funny is it's not funny, interesting. The US and the EU are saying they want to drag this war on as long as possible. But the longer it drags on, the more economic headaches they'll have, and the worse it's going to be for them. The sooner it's ended, the sooner they could maybe take some actions that would economically save their hides. But they're not going to be able to do it. And they're going to pay a dear price. So at any rate, thanks everybody. At Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram. I would say Garland Nixon on Facebook, but I'm suspended from Facebook for another 30 days because I shared an NBC News article that showed that there was Nazis in Ukraine, and the NBC News is still on Facebook because they wrote the article, but I'm not, and I shared the article. So I'm off of Facebook for another 29 days. I'm on for 29, off for 29. Out of the last 60 days, I've only had 30 on. How about that? I believe. But at any rate, so who cares about Facebook anyway? It's a dying breed. It's a dying. They all are. I'm making my move to Rockfin, ROKFIN. And once again, let me put the boom. Everybody can click on there and go to Rockfin and make sure that you become a member. Make sure you smash the like button. My email, garlandin@gmail.com. Peace. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm out.